But then something unexpected happened. Just minutes before the competition was about to start, an announcement echoed through the hall. "Attention, participants. There's been a last-minute change. The final round will not just be individual, it will be a team challenge. Students will be paired randomly." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't what anyone had prepared for. Ethan's heart skipped. He had always worked alone. Numbers made sense because they didn't need emotions, explanations, or teamwork. But before he could process it, the names were read aloud. Ethan Walker, paired with Jordan Miller. The room seemed to freeze for a moment. Jordan's jaw clenched visibly, while Ethan's stomach tightened with unease. Mr. Callahan raised an eyebrow, his smug expression shifting to surprise. No one had expected this. The challenge was even harder than before, complex problems that required collaboration, strategy, and trust. Jordan immediately took charge, his competitive nature pushing him to dominate. "I'll handle the calculations, just don't mess it up," he snapped at Ethan. But as they dove into the problems, Jordan's arrogance quickly became a liability. He made mistakes, missing key details in his rush to prove himself. Ethan saw the errors, but correcting Jordan meant risking more conflict. The clock was ticking, and the pressure mounted. Ethan's mind raced, not just with numbers, but with the question he'd been avoiding. Should he stay quiet and let them fail, or step up and risk the confrontation he'd been trying to avoid? The stakes had never been higher. The clock ticked down, each second louder than the last in Ethan's mind. Jordan's pencil scribbled furiously, his confidence unwavering even as mistakes piled up on the page. Ethan's eyes darted between the complex equations and Jordan's growing errors, the weight of the competition pressing down on him like never before. He couldn't stay silent. With only minutes left, Ethan reached out, his hand lightly tapping Jordan's arm. "That's wrong," he said quietly, pointing to a flawed calculation that would throw off the entire solution. Jordan shot him a glare. "I've got this, just let me handle it." But Ethan didn't back down this time. His voice, though soft, carried an unexpected firmness. "No, you don't. If we keep going like this, we'll fail." For a tense moment, Jordan stared at him, the room's noise fading into the background. It wasn't just about the math anymore. This was about control, pride, and the realization that maybe, just maybe, Ethan wasn't the quiet, forgettable kid he thought he was. Jordan finally shoved his pencil down with a frustrated sigh. "Fine, show me." Ethan didn't waste time. His hands moved quickly, correcting the errors with precision, his thoughts flowing effortlessly as if the numbers were speaking to him. The solution unfolded like a puzzle snapping into place. Jordan watched, disbelief slowly replacing his frustration. As the final seconds ticked away, Ethan wrote the last number, underlining it just as the timer buzzed. The room erupted with applause for the competitors, but all Ethan felt was relief. The results were announced shortly after, and to no one's surprise, Ethan and Jordan's team had the highest score. They'd won. Mr. Callahan's face was unreadable, a mix of pride, confusion, and maybe even regret. Jordan didn't say much either, just a quiet, "good job," before walking away, his ego bruised, but his respect for Ethan undeniable. But the story didn't end there. After the competition, a woman approached Ethan. She wasn't a teacher, a student, or a parent. She introduced herself as a representative from an advanced academic institute, one that specialized in nurturing young minds with exceptional abilities. "We've been watching you, Ethan," she said with a knowing smile. "You're not just a student with a talent for math. You're something more." Ethan blinked, the words sinking in. All this time, he'd been trying to hide in the background, but maybe he was never meant to. Ethan stood there, processing the woman's words as the noise of the crowd faded into the background. For so long, he had tried to blend in, to avoid attention, believing that staying invisible was the safest choice. But now, with the weight of the competition lifted and the truth of his abilities laid bare, he realized something had shifted, not just in how others saw him, but in how he saw himself. "You again," the father says, his tone polite but cautious. He glances over the CEO's shoulder as if expecting someone else to appear. The CEO's heart pounds in his chest. For a moment, he forgets the words he'd rehearsed on the way over. He takes a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I know this is unexpected," he begins, his voice softer than usual. I couldn't stop thinking about you and your daughter. I felt like I needed to." He pauses, unsure how to explain without sounding strange. "I think I can help." The father's jaw tightens. He steps halfway into the doorway, shielding his daughter slightly. "Help? Why would you want to help us?" Before the CEO can answer, a voice calls from deeper inside the apartment, a woman's voice, weak and strained. "Is everything okay, Matt?" The father, Matt, glances back and replies, "It's fine, honey. Just someone from the store." The CEO's eyes flicker past him, catching a glimpse of a woman lying on a worn-out couch, wrapped in blankets. Her face is pale, her expression tired, like someone fighting a battle she's slowly losing. That's when it hits him. The struggle isn't just financial. This family isn't just trying to survive day to day. They're fighting for something much bigger. Matt notices the CEO's gaze and sighs, his shoulders slumping with exhaustion. The walls he'd been holding up so tightly start to crack. "She's sick," he admits quietly. "My wife. Cancer. We're doing the best we can, but it's been hard." The CEO feels a lump form in his throat. The chocolate bar, the careful counting of coins, the tired eyes. It all makes sense now. This wasn't just about making ends meet. This was about saving a life. But before he can process it, Matt's phone buzzes on the small table by the door. He glances at it, and his face goes pale. He snatches it up, reading a message that drains the color from his face. "What's wrong?" the CEO asks instinctively. Matt doesn't answer right away. His hands tremble as he shoves the phone into his pocket. "It's my job. The part-time one I just started. They're cutting hours. Again, I don't know how we're going to make rent this month." The CEO's heart races. The stakes are higher than he thought. This isn't just about offering a little help. This family is standing on the edge of a cliff, and they're slipping fast. But then comes the twist he never expected. Matt looks him dead in the eye and says, "I used to work for your company, before they let me go." The words hit the CEO like a punch to the chest. Suddenly, the lines blur between stranger and connection, between guilt and responsibility. And now everything is personal. The CEO feels the words hit like a cold wave, leaving him speechless. Matt used to work for my company. 1,000 thoughts rush through his mind, scrambling to piece it all together. The guilt he's been carrying since that day in the supermarket now feels heavier, sharper, because he realizes he wasn't just watching the struggles of a stranger. He was looking at the consequences of his own decisions. Matt doesn't wait for a response. "I was part of the warehouse team," he says quietly, his voice holding a bitter edge. "Worked there for 5 years. Then they said they were restructuring, cutting costs. I was gone overnight. No warning, no severance." His jaw clenches, but his eyes betray the exhaustion underneath the anger. "It wasn't just a job. It was how I kept my family afloat." The CEO swallows hard, his chest tightening. He wants to explain, to defend himself, to say it wasn't personal, it was business. But standing here, face to face with the real impact, those words feel hollow, meaningless. "I didn't know," the CEO finally says, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize. But what good are apologies now?" Matt gives a small bitter laugh. "Yeah, that's the thing. You never do." For a long tense moment, they just stand there, two men on opposite sides of a decision made long ago. But then the CEO does something he's never done before. He steps past his pride, past the corporate mask he's worn for years. "I'm the CEO," he confesses, the words heavy with both authority and regret. I made those decisions, but I'm here now because meeting you, it changed me. Matt's eyes widened slightly, processing the revelation. The tension between them hangs thick in the air. Then the CEO adds, I can't change the past, but maybe I can fix the future. Before Matt can respond, his wife's weak voice calls out from the couch, Matt, I don't feel so good. The classroom buzzed with quiet whispers as the teacher paced in front of the chalkboard, his eyes scanning the students like a predator searching for its next target. Mr. Callahan had a reputation for being strict, but today there was something different in the air. A challenge, a test, and perhaps a lesson that no one saw coming. His gaze landed on Ethan, the quiet boy who usually kept to himself. Ethan wasn't the most outspoken student, nor did he seem particularly remarkable to most. But to Mr. Callahan, he was an easy target, someone to put on the spot, to prove a point. With a smirk, the teacher grabbed a piece of chalk and scribbled a massive equation across the board, numbers and symbols intertwining in a way that made most students' heads spin. All right, Ethan, Mr. Callahan said, stepping back with his arms crossed. Why don't you come up here and solve this? Let's see if you're paying attention. A few snickers rippled through the classroom. Everyone knew this wasn't just a question, it was a setup. The equation wasn't something they had covered. It was far beyond their level, something meant to confuse and embarrass. Ethan hesitated for a moment, his fingers tightening around the edge of his desk. His heart pounded, but not from fear. Something else stirred inside him. Slowly, he stood, making his way to the front of the room. The chalk felt cool in his hand as he stared at the equation, eyes scanning each number, each variable. The room fell silent. The smirk on Mr. Callahan's face faded slightly as Ethan lifted the chalk and began writing. His hand moved quickly, with purpose, as if the solution was second nature. Murmurs spread through the class. Mr. Callahan's eyes widened. And then, just like that, Ethan stepped back, placing the chalk down with a quiet confidence that sent a ripple through the room. No one could believe what they were seeing. Mr. Callahan stared at the board, his expression frozen between confusion and the father seems taken aback, his brows knitting together slightly. Thank you, he replies, his voice cautious but kind. There's a tiredness in his eyes, not just from the day but from life itself. They stand there for a beat, the silence stretching. The CEO wants to ask more, to understand. But how do you ask a stranger about the weight they're carrying without crossing a line? Instead, he blurts out, I work with a company, the supermarket chain. Just wanted to get some feedback, if you don't mind. It's not a complete lie, but it's far from the full truth. The father relaxes slightly, nodding. It's a good store, prices are fair, staff's nice. He hesitates, then adds quietly, wish things were a bit cheaper. But that's just how it is these days. The CEO's chest tightens. Those simple words hit harder than any boardroom presentation he's ever sat through. It's not just about prices, it's about survival. Before he can respond, the little girl's voice pipes up from the back seat. Daddy, are we going to Grandma's now? The father smiles gently, a warmth in his eyes reserved only for her. Yeah, sweetheart, we're going now. He looks back at the CEO, nods politely again, and slides into the driver's seat. The car starts, pulling away slowly. The CEO stands there, rooted in place, the sound of the engine fading into the evening air, but the questions in his mind grow louder. Who was this man really? And why does this brief encounter feel like it's about to change everything? The CEO stands motionless as the car disappears into the distance, its taillights flickering like fading embers against the darkening sky. His heart feels heavier with each passing second. He knows this encounter wasn't just random. It was a glimpse into a life shaped by the very decisions he makes behind closed office doors. But it's more than that. There's something about the father's tired eyes, the quiet sacrifice in that small gesture with the chocolate bar, that lingers. Driving home feels impossible. Instead, he gets into his own car but doesn't start it. He sits there, gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. His thoughts swirl with questions he's never bothered to ask before. How many families walk these aisles, making impossible choices. How many smiles are covering silent struggles. He thought he understood his customers through data reports and quarterly reviews, but now he realizes he's been blind. Days pass, but the encounter haunts him. The father's face, the little girl's hopeful eyes, they creep into his thoughts during meetings, while reviewing budgets, even late at night when the world is quiet.